Welcome back to Chapter Chats. Today we are diving into Chapter 4 of Chuck's 5th edition of ISD from the Ground Up, a no-nonsense approach to instructional design. This chapter, Analysis, Process, and Procedures, takes us to the heart of the instructional design process, analysis. We're going to be exploring how to define analysis within ISD, the role of the 5 W's in uncovering critical insights, and the value of different analysis methods like root cause and forensic analysis. Let's jump right in. Chuck, I've got some questions for you on analysis.
Wow, I'm surprised.
I love the giggle. All right, my first question for you is, the term analysis is central to instructional design. So how do you define it within the context of ISD, and what role does it play in creating effective learning experiences?
Yeah, analysis. It is what it is. You can't do anything without it. Even if you don't consciously know you're doing analysis, you're doing analysis. You're always looking, you're taking stuff in, you're thinking about connections. We can go back to systems theory. We've talked a lot about that. But you have to have these inputs. And there's no option about analysis. Many times people won't pay for it. I've had lots of clients who won't pay a penny for it. And that's fine, but you still do it. If you do it on your own, you got to do it. And what are the things you need to know? So we talk about NOP analysis. We've done that a couple of times on these podcasts. But you really need to think about, okay, who are your learners? What do you want them to accomplish? And what is the world in which you have to work within? And of course, in analysis, the first question is it something you can fix? So it's kind of the Hippocratic oath for instructional designers is do no harm is, can you also do any good? So first determine, okay, is this really something that we can provide a solution for? But then you got to look and you got to think, okay, who's this population? Is it one population, or do I really have more than one population because I have different experience levels? I got different language issues. I've got all these things. And if you think about analysis, it's all about being a Sherlock Holmes. I mean, I really use that a lot because you need to ask those questions. So it's the 5 W's, it's NOP analysis, it's however you want to go with this. I highlight 4 different kinds of analysis in this chapter. But you got to remember, ISD from the Ground Up, 5th edition or whatever edition, this is about folks, for the most part, that are coming into the field. I don't go into analysis. I could write an entire book on analysis, and it would be about 1/10 of what I would want to write about analysis. So remember, when you're looking in this chapter, this is an overview. We'll talk about some very specific things, but the idea is that you need to be comfortable with the idea of being an analyst. And it's not an option. Be a Sherlock Holmes. Ask all these questions. Use your intuitive instincts and the wisdom that you have about life in general and focus in on, okay, this is the job I have to accomplish.
Thanks, Chuck. It sounds like curiosity is paramount to the analysis phase. You have to be curious.
Yes.
So my second question, the 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, and why. These are part of the analysis process, as you've outlined in this chapter. Could you share how these questions guide instructional designers in uncovering critical insights?
Well, if you think about it, the 5 W's appear in a lot of different places. So when I was in law enforcement, they taught me this same approach in the police academy. It's this notion of you need to have all the information. Don't go off and make assumptions about things. So the more that you have these communications and these discussions with clients or whoever the group is you're working with, if you're working solo, then you need to bounce it off the mirror sometimes. But the idea is you have to have this information. You have to know why. You have to know who. All these things are incredibly important. So put yourself in a position of being a detective, an investigator, someone who needs to get to the bottom of whatever it is you're looking at. So the 5 W's will get you there. It will give you a background. Do you need to dig in some of them? Sometimes. And remember that analysis, sometimes it lasts an hour if you're a designer. And as I've said before, I've had analysis projects that were 2 years in length. Just an incredible amount of resources that went into it, so that on the out end of the analysis, decision could be made about whether to proceed with the project or not, or whether it's the best approach, or whether in fact there's anything that you can do about this. So as you look at the chapter and as you read through it, put yourself in the space of being a detective. Yeah, I need to get all the facts, nothing but the facts. And then it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of fun. I mean, I loved being a detective. It was just a hoot. It wasn't always fun with the stuff I was looking at, but the process itself always intrigued me. And then when I came to instructional design, it was like, wow, this is a set of skills that I can use here too. So as you're looking at the book, as you're thinking about analysis, just remember the 5 W's will get you in a good space. NOP analysis will get you in a good space. And, just do the homework, do the work, do the groundwork, however you want to term it.
All right, Chuck, question number 3. Instructional designers use a range of analysis types, including NOP and forensic, also root cause analysis. Could you explain a few of these and share an example of when each might be most effective?
That's a big question. Read the chapter. But the idea is there are times you have to gather different kinds of information and data. So if I'm going in and I'm looking at a job process, manufacturing, or, it doesn't matter what it is, if I'm trying to figure out how to best take what people do and turn it into learning, then what am I going to do? I'm going to do job task analysis. I'm going to look at, okay, how can we do this most efficiently, and what's the best case scenario, and who are the best performers? And you do all that and you look at that, and then you figure out, okay, well, this is what the best performers do. These are the key points to that, which then become my objectives eventually. And then you think about, okay, well, how am I going to evaluate mastery? And all of that comes from these observations. And so NOP analysis, we've talked about many times. So I'm not going to go too much into depth of that, but just think about it. And there are people that specialize in each types of analysis, and this is all they do their entire career. There are people that do nothing but job task analysis. That's just what they do, and they're incredibly good at it. So sometimes you look at this and think, well, it's not that big a deal. It's not going to take that long. It's not going to be whatever. It can be. And maybe your project doesn't require any of this, but maybe it does. And if you think it doesn't, maybe you ought to go back and look and think, okay, well, I'm looking at this job process. I'm looking at how people do this particular skill. So I did a lot of work in elevator and escalator apprenticeships, which I can assure you I know nothing about. But what I found is there were some people that was so incredibly good at this that I could watch them and the things that they would do. It's not that they took shortcuts or anything else, but they knew what was important. And they knew the things that everybody should be able to do and to know. And as an analyst, as a detective, having those discussions was incredibly important. Talk to people who know what they're doing. But the other thing that you want to do, and a lot of people don't think about this, is look at people that don't know what they're doing. I mean, if you have a group of people that have been hired and now you've got to train them or put together a program for them, you not only want to talk to the SMEs that know everything, you want to talk to the new folks and see what they actually think and what they know. And you'll find and process things, especially their way as a novice of getting to a solution is not what someone with experience would do. And how many times have you looked at something, and I certainly have, and I'm thinking, I don't understand how you get there. I don't understand why that's considered best practice. That makes no sense to me. So if that's your learner, you now have to come up with something that makes sense to them. You got to make those connections between where they are and where they want to be. This whole novice to expert continuum I talk about mastery in different places. So I think as we talk about it, I'm roaming around this question, but I think it's so important. You really have to find out specifically what you need to know. But more importantly, you need to put yourself in the head of your learner. And what do they know, and what's the misconceptions? What are the things that they need to be able to show mastery at the end of this? So in analysis, don't just go to the greatest. Go to the early ones. Go to the ones that don't have any experience and figure out what's going on with them too. You learn more a lot of times talking to folks that are just starting out than you do from people that are experts.
That makes a lot of sense, Chuck. Thank you for explaining that.
Well, there's one example that I found fascinating. So believe it or not, I got to work in some fields that you wouldn't even think I'd be able to pronounce the names of them. But one of them was training pilots. So training pilots in the military. So jet pilots. So people that are flying the helicopters and doing all the stuff. And what they came up when they did analysis and evaluation of their performance was there's actually a fifth level of perfection. So we think about level one is you can kind of do it. Level two, you can sort of do it. You go through this till you get to level four where you can do it without making mistakes. What they found in jet pilots was there was this fifth level where they don't do what they can do perfectly. They do something different because they found in their experience, and this is better. And if you think about that for a second, it kind of makes your head hurt. It's this notion of, okay, we think that the people that are really good at this is all second nature to them and they don't think about it and they just, which is all true. But it's also, there's a smaller group of those that go on to the next level, which is, I can do this better. It's not that I'm being contrary or that I don't agree with what I've been taught or what I've practiced. It's this notion that my experience has taught me that there's something else I can do that is more effective and efficient.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Fourth question, worst case scenario. Sounds intense. This worst case scenario analysis. Why would an instructional designer use this approach, this worst case scenario analysis, and how can it help improve the learning experience?
Well, one thing I always say to designers, whether they're learning from me or learning not from me, however you want to look at it, is this notion is there's no perfect world. And this goes back to chaos theory, which I talk about all the time. You're sick of it, but I'm still going to talk about it. You can't control everything. There are things that happen that you don't think should happen, that don't seem to have a rational connection to what you're doing. And what I found is when I take groups through worst case scenario, or what's the absolute worst thing that can happen in this training or this project or whatever, we really get to some very important kind of things to think about. And I've given lots of examples before, but I think it's this whole notion is the unknown unknowns. You don't know these are problems until they become problems. And so you sit back and you think, okay, well, this is an 8-hour course on this. It's in the classroom. We're thinking about migrating it online, but right now it's in the classroom, which most training still is in the classroom, largest majority of it. So the notion is, okay, what can happen? So do you ever think about people being late? One thing that I've found all the time where there's transportation issues within a population, either they have to take the bus or public transit, or they don't have transportation and they're not used to going to this location because it might be somewhere else that they're not comfortable with or never been to. What's your answer when they aren't there at 8 o'clock? Have you thought about that? What happens if the projected media doesn't work? What happens if you have a crisis within your learners? Someone has an emergency at home and they become very excited and upset within the classroom, which happens. I mean, people are people, right? We react to our situation, our environment. And there's those kind of things. The other thing is, what happens if you've just made a mistake in what you're teaching? What if they start fighting back? What if they say that's nonsense? What if they say, I'm not going to do that? And so worst case scenario is not just one thing. It's what are all the things that can go wrong here? And if you are migrating this out across the country, across the world, you need to have a pretty good session or two about what can go wrong. So what if the books don't show up? What if the internet isn't working? What's the one thing that you can tell me, Denise, that would just rock your world if you were facilitating this course?
Well, I can tell you it happened to me when I was teaching a class on ChatGPT when it first came out. And I was the only one who could access Chat GPT at the time. For some reason, everybody in the class, it was in the early stages. And so it wasn't as powerful and robust, and people could not access it. And so all the things I had planned for that class went bottom up really fast. And I had to think very quickly on my feet. And, we had to do it together as a group with just mine showing up on the overhead. It wasn't ideal, but it worked.
And that's the kind of thing. And if it's only that kind of thing, count yourself lucky.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that can go wrong. So just spend the time, find the things that may mess up, and hope they don't happen.
Yeah. My last question for this chapter chat. Concepts like analysis paralysis, fuzzy logic, and chaos theory can be very challenging for designers. Can you share how these ideas impact the work of instructional designers and how they might overcome these kinds of challenges?
Well, analysis paralysis, I can't tell you how many times I've been stuck in the middle of that one. We all have. And depending on the power base that you bring to this equation, so are you an outside consultant? Are you an in-house, I'm in this department, I do this every day with all these people situation? And the more political the organization and the more outside influences are within this organization, the more you're going to have that kind of paralysis. And I can't tell you how many times in political organizations where there are lots of different subsets of people that come together as a consortium or do something like that, and someone feels the need to get approval on every single thing every single day, and trying to get approval for things in instructional design where people don't really appreciate what we do or what the requirements are or anything else. I've seen 1 month projects take 2 years. So as a professional designer, you've got to figure out what your strategy is. And many of the times early on with these groups, I'll say, we can't go to this place in this process. Somebody has to be the decision maker. I need one person to tell me it's okay to move ahead, or that this is okay or that's okay. I don't need a committee. I mean, we can talk about things. That's fine. We'll talk to your board. We'll talk to all your members. We'll do whatever you like, but I need one person that can make these decisions, or else we're going to be doing this forever. And you don't think it's a problem until you're stuck in the middle of it. And I can't tell you how frustrating that can be. So when I talk about it in the book, what I'm trying to do is give you a heads up. This is something you might face. And if you do face it, don't be afraid to ask for somebody to make a decision. Don't be afraid to move things forward. If you have to get sign off from 15 or 20 people, you're never going to get a project done, because they're not going to understand something and they're going to want clarification, and we're going to do all these things. And that's fine if you need to do that at some point in this process. But at the same time, you need one decision maker.
Yeah, thanks so much for explaining all of that, Chuck. This has been a great conversation about Chapter 4 in your book. If you'd like access to this book, purchase your own copy. There is a link in the description, so check that out. Thanks so much for tuning in.